My wife and I had our daughter when we were pretty young. Like most 21-year-olds, we thought we had everything figured out, but on the day of our daughter's birth, the doctors threw a wrench in our grand plan. For those who don't know, there are certain conditions that you can screen for while the mother is pregnant, but we chose not to do this. One of the conditions you can screen for is Down syndrome, and so when the doctors told us that that's what our daughter had, it was pretty shocking. For anyone else who's gone through a similar experience, you sort of grieve the child that you thought you were going to have. Fortunately, that process for us was pretty quick and we got to the acceptance stage way before our little girl came home. But that was the first step for me in figuring out what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be. Before I had my daughter, I'd go to work, come home, get high and play video games with my wife. It was fucking awesome. But things had to change when we had our girl, so things did. We carried on for a few years just working, coming home, being a parent and going off to work again. My wife and I both worked in care, so we could alternate our shifts and it worked out pretty well. But then I was beginning to feel that I needed something more. I was becoming frustrated with my job. I was using up all my mental energy at work and I would come home an empty husk. I never really felt like I was turning my brain off, and it felt like every single day I was caring for someone, whether that's on a 12-hour shift or at home with my daughter. I needed to break that cycle, so I started looking for other jobs. One of the things that I realized was that money is not really that big a driver for me. You could offer me double what I was getting paid, but if I hated that job, then it didn't really seem like much of an upgrade. So I started looking for jobs that had something to do with some of the things that I was passionate about. After a few weeks of searching online, I came across this online course called Train to Game. They offered courses in video game programming, game design, and art and animation. I met with a rep, and with some encouragement from my wife, I took the art and animation course. And this started my journey in learning 3D modeling. After a while struggling to get to grips with it, I really started to enjoy it. I also started drawing much more than I had done before. For the first time, I was really enjoying what I was doing and at the same time achieving something that I could apply in real life. I wasn't grinding for that legendary item drop, I was grinding for a qualification, a job, a career. At least, that was the plan. Unfortunately, the Train to Game course wasn't quite as awesome as I'd first thought. None of the events that were promised ever happened, we didn't network with anyone, and I found out later that a lot of the books that we had were pretty dated. So by the time the course had finished, a lot of us felt confused, frustrated, and ill-prepared. I wanted to continue making 3D models in 3ds Max, but I just simply couldn't afford the software anymore. I knew of Blender, but I felt that I'd be starting all over again, so I walked away. As much as I enjoyed 3D modeling, it was drawing that I was truly in love with. I had bought a Wacom Bamboo tablet and I really started to love digital art. I figured that I could just become a concept artist or sell art prints as my career. Unfortunately, I hadn't taken the time to educate myself on how to draw properly. I didn't understand perspective, anatomy, figure drawing, line weight, colour, I still don't, value, or anything else that's useful when it comes to making 2D art. So I hopped onto YouTube and the QBrush forums and started to learn. During this time, a work colleague approached me about making a graphic novel. He'd always wanted to write one and he knew I liked to draw, so it was a match made in heaven. I've already spoken about this experience in this video here, so I won't repeat myself. But it was this experience that made me realise what I loved about drawing the most, which was storytelling. Sequential art is what I love to do more than anything else, and so that's why I fell in love with comics. The problem was, I didn't really know what I was doing. Everything was guesswork. I would make massive assumptions about how things worked, and the results were pretty hideous. I looked into comic artists and followed them on social media so I could try and glean some nuggets of knowledge that I could apply to my own work. That's when I stumbled upon cartoonist Dan Berry. Like with the other artists that I was following, I stalked his social media for a while and discovered that he was a lecturer at university. I thought that was cool and assumed that he was an arts lecturer or something like that. As luck would have it, he was a lecturer in comics. I couldn't quite believe that such a thing existed, and so I did my research and found out that he worked at Wrexham in Wales. It took me less than a week for me to decide that that's what I wanted to do. It felt like it would be what I needed to prepare me for a career in comics, and so off I went to Wrexham for that degree. Of course, Dan left the year that I started. Bummer. But whether Dan was there or not, I'm glad that I did it because it enabled me to learn how to create comics where I wouldn't have been able to do so without that degree. In fact, by the third year of my bachelor's, I decided to start this YouTube channel, mostly because I wanted to make videos that I knew that I would find useful or interesting 5 years ago. Perhaps the biggest surprise in all of this is how much I enjoy making videos. Go figure. I don't know what the next step for me is yet, but everything that I've done has led me here today. One of the things that I used to struggle with was regret. I wish I'd figured out all of this before I'd had my daughter. I used to imagine where I'd be now if that had happened. Being a parent is tricky at the best of times, but trying to launch a career out of nothing at the same time, it's challenging. But the reason I no longer feel regret is because it was my daughter who made me realize what I wanted to do in the first place. If I didn't have a child, I wouldn't have bothered looking for that online course. If my wife hadn't encouraged me to go for the art and animation thing, I wouldn't have done the comic. I wouldn't have found Dan Berry, I wouldn't have gone to Wrexham at 27, and I wouldn't have started this YouTube channel. Some people say that having a kid can get in the way of your dreams. I'm sure in some cases that is true. But for me, having my kid opened my eyes to what my dreams actually were, because before that I didn't have a clue. My journey to success, whatever that looks like, may be slower than a younger, childless person's, but my secret weapon's my daughter. Have fun drawing. If you watched all of that, then thank you, because this is the most self-indulgent video I've made to date. Next week's is going to be exactly the same, except I'm going to talk about the heart surgery that I had 2 years ago, which changed everything. Give the video a like if you got something out of it, and don't forget to subscribe because it will make you feel good. Well, it'll make me feel good. But the main thing I'm interested in is your stories. Was there a catalyst in your life that led to you becoming an artist? Was there a catalyst that stopped you from being an artist? Share what you can, because I think it can help others, especially when they feel alone in their situations.